all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thanks for showing up. Anyone here for the first time? Well, welcome. Those who are here first time. This practice is, it's kind of like binge watching a Netflix series, right? And what I mean by that is, any of you ever binge watched a Netflix series? Just want to make sure you're all alive. What I mean by that is when you start, right? Anyone start one recently? Nobody? Really? Thank you for the one honest person in the back. I appreciate it, right? When you started, what happened? How far into, I don't need to what it was or how, but when you started, how long did it take you to get through it?
Well, I'm not finished, but it's I just got through the first season, so it's been it's like my free time spent just with that,
Say that again louder so everybody hears it.
My free time spent just doing that.
Your free time is spent just doing that. And you just finished season 1, and it took you how long? Like a week?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah. Not that I'm speaking from experience, but it's just a guess. And well, first off, what's your name?
Neil.
Neil, I appreciate, Neil, that you actually gave up some of your binge watching of the start of season 2 to be here tonight. So I feel quite honored that you chose this over that, because you could have been at home and had them both up. But the reason I bring that up is, this practice is something that you have to commit to. Otherwise, what good is it? Now, for those who are new to here, or maybe brand new to Buddhism, this might not apply to you because you're just starting. So if that is you, then here's your kind of first lesson that this stuff only works. You only get through it. You only fully understand season 1 and season 2 and everything else that's after that if you play. You have to hit play. And this path and this practice is the same way. Unfortunately, most often, very often I should say, with so many Western folks who come into Buddhism, is it becomes something very much on the outside of their life. And what I mean by that is there's your life, there's your personal life, your family, your friends, your relationships, your school, your work, whatever that might be. And then you kind of carve out a little window to explore meditation, explore Buddhist teachings, explore your spiritual journey. And it becomes just like a little thing. And we definitely don't treat it like we treat a Netflix series. Like we got, all your free time is spent there. How much of our free time, and this is just something for you to think about, is spent really exploring the nature of your mind? How much of your free time is spent exploring why you think what you think, why you say what you say, why you do what you do. How much of your free time is spent thinking about how your thoughts and words and actions impact the people around you? How much of your free time is spent looking at what is my meditation practice truly? What am I actually reading or studying around meditation and Buddhist teachings? Like, what am I really, when I hit play, what does that really mean with a meditation or Buddhist practice? Because it's not a thing that you just kind of check out. I mean, it can be, and then it never has any impact on your life. But for this stuff, these teachings, this practice to really impact your life, you have to commit to it. You have to have the discipline. And I don't care if that discipline is this temple. There's seriously like 50 Buddhist temples within 15 miles of here. So to me, I don't care where you go. I don't care if you sit at home and just YouTube Dharma talks all day long, right? All I care about is that you begin to explore a spiritual practice, put that into your day-to-day life so it actually impacts you and the people around you. Otherwise, it's just something. To me, Buddhist practice is not just something you talk about. It's something you live. It becomes every part of your day. And you commit to that over and over and over again, every moment throughout your day. You know, all the chaos and all the joy and all the happiness and all the sadness and all the excitement. You just keep committing to this practice. Because the alternative, suffering, sucks. And most people don't show up here because everything in their life is perfectly peaceful and happy. It's not what leads us to this path. Right? We come into it because something just isn't quite how we'd like it to be. And the greater effort we put into exploring what that is, the easier it is to understand how to make changes in our lives so we are more settled, more calm, more at peace. And the last thing I'll say before we start meditation is, you know, somebody asked me today, it's the common question, you know, I've been calling this Intro to Buddhism for 14 years. You know, I've been doing it twice a week, every week for 14 years. And people often say, what's next? You know, after like 3 classes. I'm like, all right, what's next? You know? And so I said to the person, do you know the Four Noble Truths? They're like, yeah. I said, no, do you know them? Not just memorize them. I said, can you tell me the cause of your greed, or examples of your greed, your anger, and your ignorance? They said, yes, absolutely. And I said, well, then can you tell me what you're doing? List 30 things that you're doing to help work through greed, anger, and ignorance with generosity, compassion, and wisdom. And just a blank stare. So we can hear the Four Noble Truths over and over and over again. You can memorize them in as many ancient languages as you'd like. But until you can actually truly embody and understand how to work through them, there's nothing else. That's where it begins. That is the intro right there. So with that, we'll continue with our meditation piece of the intro to Buddhism and meditation. To those who are joining virtually, welcome. Thanks for showing up and being here. A couple things to tell you before we begin. For those who are maybe new or sitting for the first time, nothing's going to happen to you. Not going to float away. Not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice when you don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you're already pushing, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten, shoulders are relaxed. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, also just trying to sit up straight, relaxing the shoulders. Hands are on the knees or lap. If you are brand new, just remember you're not trying to go blank, you're not trying to think nothing, you're not trying to empty your mind. You're just trying to be aware of it and learn to stay present. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice. Observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. letting go of expectation, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. Most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap, where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. With a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. Most of you wanted to make it out of this room before you're disturbed. We only got like 20 minutes left. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's work. It's not an escape, as often people think it is, and the reason they come to meditation or Buddhist practice to begin with is to escape from something. This practice is waking up to the present moment. And the present moment is very often filled with tremendous conflict, chaos, difficulties, challenges. That's life. And this practice is beginning to look at what we call conflict and chaos and challenges and seeing them for what they actually are, which is just a series of causes and conditions that we have created in our lives. And yet we spend so much of our time wanting to blame everybody else for everything that's wrong with us. Blame everyone else for everything that's not going well in our lives. Blame everyone else for all the experiences we've had. There are experiences. Doesn't mean terrible things haven't happened to you. Doesn't mean horrific, traumatic things haven't happened to you. It's beginning to understand what all of that has created in this moment is an opportunity and ability to practice with difficulty and not run from it. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. Sitting, breathing, becoming aware of everything you think, say, and do. That's all. And that's why we, as I spoke about at the beginning, it's something you just, you're putting another quarter into play every single day. It's almost like those of you in the room old enough to remember the arcade and you pop a quarter in the machine and every so often you come to one and it's got you don't even need the quarter anymore. It's just constantly starting the game over again. That's what this practice is every single moment. It's just every moment starting over. And that's really difficult when we carry so many past stories, excuses, blame. Really hard to live in the present moment when we're carrying our entire life's worth of trauma with us. That bag gets pretty heavy. So don't be afraid to set it down every once in a while and open your eyes and look around, because life is pretty magical everywhere you go. There's so much beauty to enjoy and appreciate. So much love and care everywhere around us. And the question is, how often do we actually see that? So with that, I think I'll pause. For me, I always just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And for those who are joining virtually, again, welcome. There's a chat box on your screen. Feel free to chime in as you are, say hello. Any thoughts, questions, you're welcome to put them there, and I'll do my best to respond as well virtually. So we'll use the rest of our brief time for questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and go from there. Yeah.
Do you ever have any powerful insights when you're sitting?
No. That was an easy one. Usually you give me like really thought-provoking questions, you know? I love the fact that you thought that would be a really thought-provoking question, and it was the simplest one you've ever asked me. I've never had any insights when I sit, other than my back hurts. That's about as awakening as it's ever been for me. You know? My back hurts. Oh, I'm getting old. Wow. I should stretch more. Yeah, I don't, you know, you've sat with me enough to know, but for those who are new, like I don't sit with any expectation of gaining any insight into anything whatsoever. I sit with the effort and the attempt to train the mind to be present on sensation of breath. And the moment that my mind wanders off sensation of breath to anything, the practice is to recognize the wandering mind and come back to sensation of breath. And I'll do that about 1,000 times. So even if it wandered to any sort of incredible, seemingly like, oh, there it is, I would just come back to the breath anyways. But it never has. But just in case I ever get close, I'm still coming back to the breath. Yeah.
Do you use that same technique if you're in a situation where you're being triggered or something?
Yeah.
Just focus on the breath.
Always. So the question is, those who didn't hear it, do I use the same technique if you're in a situation where you're being triggered? Do you just focus on the breath? That's exactly why I'm training my mind to focus on the breath. Not to be good at meditation. Not to be good at focusing on my breath. But so when I'm living my life, which is outside of the cushion, off of the cushion, and I'm in that world out there, that isn't, 50 people in a room sitting all quietly, peacefully. There's a million people out there going a million miles an hour and they don't care about your meditation and they'll run you over. So this is practice for when we go outside. And that is absolutely the practice, to begin to recognize anything that is triggering you. And, to take it even, I think, not one step further, but just another way to look at it is not only beginning to recognize if and when you're triggered, to train the mind to come back to the breath, but having a deep understanding of what potentially would trigger you and creating your life to where nothing triggers you. So, yeah, you just see what we refer to as triggers as just life happening around us. But our mind grabs onto that, creates a story all very quickly, and that becomes the trigger. If we just don't grab onto that story to begin with, no trigger. Yeah.
So, I see you were trying to train the mind. What is so parallel to that, or separately from that? What is the value in studying the Four Noble Truths or studying Buddhism?
None whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny you should ask that. And I say that very jokingly and very seriously. The question is, you understand the practice of training the mind. So then the question, I'm just repeating for anybody virtually maybe didn't hear it. Then your question was, but then what's the point of studying the Four Noble Truths or anything in Buddhism? And I said, there is none. And it might sound like I'm being kind of sarcastic and dismissing it, but ultimately, are you familiar with the Heart Sutra? Okay, so you are now. And
Well, I've heard the name.
Oh, so you've heard of it, yeah.
I have no idea what
So-
it means.
when you get home, I suggest Google Heart Sutra and stick to the first 2 pages, like first 2 Google searches, and read any one of them. You'll see a bunch of different translations. The Heart Sutra is one of the most commonly recited Buddhist sutra around the world. It's in what's called the Prajnaparamita Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, as it's kind of a condensed version of what's called the Diamond Sutra. Diamond Sutra is super long, just the Heart Sutra is quicker to read. And there's a piece of the Heart Sutra that says, you know, as you reference, all of Buddhist teachings, the first teaching of the Buddha is the Four Noble Truths. Very first thing he says, life is filled with dukkha, suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. A full life of things not going our way. Second noble truth is what's the cause? He said the cause is greed, anger, ignorance, as I mentioned earlier. He said we overcome greed, anger, ignorance by practicing generosity for greed, compassion for anger, and wisdom to overcome ignorance. Third noble truth is the ending of suffering, nirvana, liberation, freedom from suffering, free from cravings, desires, attachments, right? And the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path. Correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. All of that laid out, also on Google, also for free. Just check it out. You're good to go. Your question is, what's the point of studying all of that? The Heart Sutra says very clearly, there is no suffering. There's no cause of suffering. There is no cessation of suffering. And there is no path. There is no wisdom or any attainment. With nothing to attain, bodhisattvas, enlightened beings, attain anuttara samyak sambodhi, supreme ultimate awakening. Who am I to argue with the Heart Sutra? Don't read the Heart Sutra to ever understand it.
Can you explain?
No. The question was, can I explain it? No. Practice it. Don't explain it. Live it. Don't explain it. Be confused. Perfect. The problem is we often think we know. And what the Heart Sutra, Diamond Sutra, and in what's called the Mahayana Sutras, this body of Buddhist teachings, what it's really getting at is the emptiness teachings and this world of duality that we live in. And the Diamond Sutra is not, the practice of non-duality. But as soon as we think there is a Four Noble Truth to follow, we think there's a sense of self that must follow it. As soon as we give rise to a sense of self, we're screwed. And here we are. And I'm in the same boat with all of you, don't worry.
So what if we just skip reading the Heart Sutra and all the others and just practice mindfulness?
Well, so what if we just skip it all?
Except for the practice of mindfulness.
Understood. So as I said, I don't know if I forget, but just Saturday someone asked about mindfulness, and as Karmalekshi Soma, the great Buddhist nun teacher, said one time to a group of college students, referring to this Western movement of mindfulness, she said, you could mindfully rob a bank. I know you weren't referring to this, I'm just giving this as an example. I don't see you robbing a bank anytime soon. And you could mindfully murder somebody. Mindfulness without moral ethical behavior won't get you so far. So you could skip it all if you want.
Yeah, okay.
Can you spend every single moment of your life being kind to every single person, including yourself? If you can, skip it all. If you can't, don't skip any of it until you're ready to skip it. Now that I've completely confused everybody. Yeah. Fun stuff. Just be nice, it's a lot easier. What else? Thoughts, questions?
So who made the Heart Sutra?
Donald Duck.
Okay, and I understand what you're saying, how that's different than the basic Buddhist teachings, like Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path, because it brings in the ego and the sense of self. So how hard to wrap your mind around, really. Like how the two kind of are married together, but totally opposite in some ways as well. So was the Heart Sutra one of the Buddhist teachings? Or was it, it was?
Doesn't matter.
I'm just curious.
I know you're curious, and I'm asking you if it matters.
I
What if
think-
it was the teaching of Jesus? What if it was the teaching of Donald Duck? Well, what if it was the teaching of, you know?
Well, I think it would be some perspective to see where the two seem so divisive.
They're not divisive. You all ask the questions. You put us in this direction. I'm just running with it, right? It is only the attachment to sense of self and this versus that would see them as divisive. The Heart Sutra is coming from the perspective of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. So it starts out when the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara was coursing in the perfection of wisdom. She perceived that all 5 skandhas are empty: form, sensation, perception, volition, consciousness. You have 2,000 years of people studying, practicing, and sharing the Heart Sutra, Diamond Sutra. It is, around the world, one of the, like I said, most commonly recited and practiced Buddhist teaching for 2,000 years. But what we want to do when we come across it is we want to understand it, we want to intellectualize it, and we want to make sense of it. To me, the beauty of the Heart Sutra and the beauty of the emptiness teachings is to help us understand that the entire world is different from how we perceive it to be. We want answers, right? We want to understand, we want logic. The answers we've been seeking, the logic we've been using, and our attachment to views that we've been stuck with our whole life have led us here. What the Heart Sutra, in my unenlightened view, is trying to get us to do is to step away from trying to actually put something in a box and understand it and check it off and say, yep, got it. That path doesn't work. If it did, we'd all be at home watching Netflix right now.
So maybe that is Buddhism 2.0, when we're done with the intro class.
It's, yeah, I don't know. Maybe, yeah.
Can you go over again the statues and the meaning of the figures?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just touch on the main 3. This is Samantabhadra Bodhisattva. He represents the practice of great diligence, great effort. And it was the last thing the Buddha taught before he died. So there he is, he's 80 years old, he's about to die, and he's got all his disciples and everybody around him, and they said, who's going to teach us when you're gone? Have you heard this story or no? He said, who's going to teach us when you're gone? They were afraid, like, who's going to be their teacher now? And he said, I've left you all the teachings. You know, he taught for 45 years before he died. He became called the Buddha. Buddha just means awakened. At 35, for 45 years, he roamed out India and taught. And so he said to them, I've taught you for 45 years. When I die, strive on with diligence and be enlightened to yourself. The way I translate that is like, if somebody's told you the same stuff as they say in Buddhism, 84,000 different ways of sharing his teachings, if someone's told you the same thing for 45 years, and when they die, you're worried about who's going to teach you next, the problem ain't the teacher. Right? So, you know what it means to be nice to everybody, right? Do you need 50 more people to tell you to be nice to everybody? No. We just have to start doing it. So that represents that effort, that diligence to not quit. And the 6 tusks of the elephant represent the paramitas, which I talk about almost every week, of generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, and wisdom. Those are, in Buddhism, we call the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfections, the 6 practices to go from a world of suffering, nirvana, or from a world of suffering, samsara, into a world of nirvana, free from suffering. So that's what the 6 tusks represent, right? This one is Manjushri. He represents ultimate wisdom. And as I said earlier, we overcome the ignorance that we have with the practice of wisdom. Now, the kind of representation of, in this form of the lion is, you ever been in a cage with a crazy wild lion?
Not yet.
Not yet. Next week, right? Tuesday, 2 o'clock. The idea is that that metaphor of being in a cage with a crazy lion is what it's like spending all day long in our head with our thoughts that are just killing us. And with the practice of ultimate wisdom, Manjushri representing ultimate wisdom, took the crazy wild lion and tamed him into a cute little looking cat. Doesn't look too dangerous up there now, does he? No. So that's the practice of Manjushri. In Tibetan, you have up there that tanka, you see the sword. Same Manjushri, just Tibetan versus maybe a Taiwanese or a Chinese or Japanese style. The sword they consider the sword of wisdom. So the wisdom sword cuts through all of our ignorance. So different cultures represent them differently. And then this behind me here is the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. Her name means hearer of the world's cries. So the Dalai Lama, they say, is the literal rebirth of Kuan Yin Bodhisattva. And she hears all the suffering in the world and pours out compassion to heal. Very often holding or pouring. This one shows her pouring the vase of compassion. And so she hears the suffering and pours out compassion to heal. So, we were downtown for 10 years, moved here 6 years ago when we were putting this together and talked about putting 3 main shrine pieces up. For us, what we needed in this community, in this city, in this state, in this country, in this world, is more compassion. And definitely the female embodiment, female energy of Kuan Yin. So that's the 3 statues.
Is there a differentiation between male and female energy in Buddhism?
So the question is there a differentiation between the male-female energy in Buddhism? Ultimately, no. Now, I also want to point out, just historically, to understand that in India, and you may have heard me say this before, but in India, 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ, you had no equality, right? Amongst anything, gender, class, whatever it may have been. And at the time of the Buddha, it was the Buddha and the monks. It was a boys' club. And it was actually his aunts who raised him. His mother died at birth. About 7 days after he was born, so after he was born, his mother died. And so his aunt, his mother's sister, raised him. And after the Buddha goes on his journey, he comes back at 35, he sits down in a Bodhi tree, they call him the Buddha, comes back to the palace to his family, and, starts ordaining the guys, right? And his aunt really wanted to ordain to become a nun. Buddha said, nope, men only. And I know, what's up with that, right? Some enlightened guy he was. And so then, and I'm paraphrasing everything here. Completely paraphrasing that part. And then one of his disciples came up to him and said, do women not have the same abilities to awaken as men do? He said, yes, they do. And from that moment on, they started to ordain women. And so he's, in that context, really considered very much kind of a rebel going against the stream of how things were in India to give some equality at all. Now, again, without turning it into now way late in the class, but even within men and women being ordained as monks and nuns, there were differences there as well, right? The monks had 227 precepts to follow. The nuns had 311. I know. I wish you all could see this expression. I wish you all could see everybody's expressions that I see, because it makes it so much more, But again, it's too late to get into all that right now. But to your question, and I just wanted to start with that before I say what I'm about to say, where I say ultimately, no, there is no male, female difference, energy, things like that. Ultimately, the Buddhist teachings are beyond form. It's formless. And to me, that's one of the reasons I love Kuan Yin so much, is Kuan Yin often is referred to as beyond gender. Now, in this culture, in many cultures, most cultures, I think, Kuan Yin is considered, or referenced, I should say, in the female form. Throughout Asia, even beyond Buddhism, she's considered the goddess of mercy and compassion. So outside of Buddhist religious views, you have her as a goddess of mercy and compassion. So very often depicted in the female form. But ultimately, Kuan Yin transcends gender, which is one of the many reasons we have Kuan Yin sitting here. But I also want to point out that we cannot just say Buddhism is beyond form and expect everyone to embrace that and abide by that, because this world doesn't. This world, meaning us and the people in these communities, we are stuck in a realm of identifying forms, genders. We're very far from being where we hopefully someday will be. But so I see that as a beautiful representation of being beyond form, but not an excuse to say, oh, we're all the same. No. We deal with very different things, and I sit here as a very privileged, white, straight, able-bodied male with every privilege in the book. And all the formlessness in the world doesn't take that away. We'll do one more question before we close. If anyone has anything?
How do you embrace stillness?
How do I embrace stillness? I don't know that I really do. I think that, in a way, my practice has been less about embracing stillness and more about embracing the madness and the craziness that exists. Now, sure, I could say that while sitting in a seated meditation, I am being still, right? I mean, being trained in the Zen path, Zen practice, you sit, you're trained to not move, which isn't, the way for everybody, isn't the way that you have to be, but that's how you're trained. That's what you're taught. And even then, I don't know that I would call embracing it. I would say you're just being with it. Maybe that is embracing. But I think of this, for me as a practitioner, more of, I'm not a very still person. Mind or body, never have been. Go, go, go. And I'm still that way. Still, that's funny. I'm still that way. And so I think it's been more about embracing the go, for lack of better words, and finding stillness, maybe, if that's even a reach to pull that word in, finding comfort, finding joy in the going. Again, for me as a practitioner, everyone's personal path and practice is different, but I'm not practicing to achieve some great sense of stillness. I got shit to do. And if my mind can be steady, I think these are probably the words that really I would apply to my practice more: steady, calm, aware is the practice. But I don't know if there's any stillness there. I mean, I just said mind, like I was saying earlier, mind wanders back to breath, mind wanders back to breath. I'm not sitting there for 18 minutes with my mind on my breath. It's a fight to come back to the breath. So, yeah, thanks. All right, so we'll join palms as we close. We'll do a transfer of merit. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Carol's mother during her time of suffering, and to Carol and her family and friends who also suffered this time. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, so we'll do just a few quick announcements before you head out. Our Dharma Bum host, John, will share a few words with y'all.
Hello everyone, I'm tonight's host, John. We opened the Dharma Bum Temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They are simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice. Every night we have different classes led by different people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone battling addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 5 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and also posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We also have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it, then bring it back whenever you are done with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. If a few people could stay to close and latch the windows, that would be helpful. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.
Thanks, John. Thank you all.